History, folks. History is the subject, and fittingly so. The most well prepared podcast I've ever been a part of. And that isn't saying much, but it's still something to say, right? The very first, the premiere edition of the Historical Oracle. We are back to September 1995. We're about to enter a boom period, an iconic era of professional wrestling. And it's all, it's quickly approaching. We start a natural point. The Monday Night War is about to begin. Oracle, we've been talking this through a lot on the late night grid. Are you fired up, pal? We'll get this started.
I'm very fired up. I'm very excited. Um, it's a personal journey of mine that I've wanted to take for a long time, and the stars seem to have aligned to where I can take it, and I'm willing to take it, and I'm enjoying it. Um, I've said this before, and I'll say it at the start. The goal is to watch everything that's available on Peacock, starting from the beginning of the Monday Night Wars, September 4th, 1995, first Nitro, including ECW, all the way until April 1st, 2001, WrestleMania 17. 67 total episodes. The April 1st, 27 or the April 1st WrestleMania 17 would include and fall into the March 2001 category. That will obviously take probably well over a year to do. God willing or God forbid we last that long. Joke. I also can't guarantee that we're going to get it done, right? That's a lot of watching. We have lives outside of this, other projects, other things going on. But I'm confident we can get a pretty good ways through, and I think Joe agrees with me there. We can make it at least a year or two into this thing. I think.
Yes.
Hopefully we can finish it. Hopefully we can. But for now, let's have fun. Let's enjoy the ride, and see how far we can make it, and hopefully, with some T's and P's and other things, maybe we can complete this project that 6,745 other people have done.
There you
go. But it's a late night grin version, and ECW being an addendum, as well as or I guess being added. I don't know if addendum would be the correct term for that.
It might be. I don't know.
It might be. I don't know. I failed too many vocabulary tests. That's another running joke I've made on here. But we'll see. We'll see. But so we start with September 1995. Joe is shocked at how prepared I was for this. I sent him a whole Google Doc of notes. We've got that lined up here, and I think let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, so because this is the first episode, and look, you're right. This is a project that if there's one area of wrestling that's been covered, it's this one, right? But I don't know some of this a lot of this ECW stuff, in fact, and I don't know what part of the audience knows what. So, with the first episode in mind, I think we should try and set the stage somewhat as to where we're at in September 1995, right? Wrestling has had a interesting, to put it politely, few years. There's been quite the lulls. WCW is over a year removed from Hogan's entry. They're taking it Monday nights. They're the kind of broad strokes here. From your perspective, and again, you don't have to go into much detail because we're going to go step by step as we go through this process. But if someone had no idea, what is wrestling looking like when we start this project?
So I kind of want to, obviously we're focused on the States, right? And the big two, arguably the big three. I mean, ECW was, certainly by 97, they were the third biggest after Barely Legal. But you've got WCW, WWF, and ECW. Those are, of course, the promotions we'll be covering here. Each company's kind of going through a different phase. The big two really had a big tsunami hit them in the early to mid 90s with the steroid trials that not only affected the WWF but affected the whole industry, including WCW. And there's still a business recovery from that, inside and outside, internally and externally. they're still recovering a lot from that. Both are. WCW is completely different from what it was a year to 15 months prior to this. Bischoff's vision, or at least early vision, was to bring in Hogan. He successfully did that, and it sort of became what WWF was in the late 80s, cartoonish, Dungeon of Doom feud, right? We're going to cover a lot of that here. Less focused on in-ring work. WCW always had that, I think, to the bitter end. Well,
maybe about a year short of the bitter end, right? A couple of years, 18
they always
months.
had it on worldwide.
There you go.
I'll give them that. When Russo came in, that was totally flipped upside down, obviously. But it's a completely different promotion than it was, and it's been a rough year for them. Vader has just left. We'll discuss that when we get to that. Of course, we know the debut of Luger, and we'll get to that. ECW is having a great year. They became really a big cult sensation in the latter half of '94, and the Raven and Dreamer feud is really kind of the feud that like sparked,
Yes,
or at least kind of defines that era. And it just consumes all '95, but there's a lot of players and a lot of things going on, and it's really well done. Really a true masterpiece of Heyman's booking occurs in '95 ECW throughout, up and down the card, particularly with the bigger programs. So it's getting a lot of tread. It's getting a lot of popularity. Obviously, Joe wasn't born yet, and I was barely, I was just short of 3 years old.
right.
So we don't have that context of watching it live, but I can say from my oldest brother, Dylan, that, the tape trading and stuff, ECW was really getting in, was a big, that was its avenue, was tape trading.
Right.
And I remember him telling me he got double tables, which happened in, I think, February '95. And I think he said the first ECW episode he ever turned on was February of '96. So it came on at 2 a.m. and I can't remember what channel I said it came on. It was Tuesday nights at 2 a.m. In Charleston, South Carolina, where we were living at the time. So we're just a few months shy of that. So I mean, it's kind of it kind of grows. ECW kind of grows,
Right.
throughout the country.
It's worth noting and you would speak this better than I because you've seen more of it. And we can get into this month by month, but a big part of ECW's not only image, identity, but purpose is its contrast to the struggles of the big two, right? 1995 is an infamous year for both WWF and WCW in terms of just not just commercially, but critically, it's like the bottom tier.
Right.
And ECW, as you just said, it was the contrast to that, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that was like 95 through 97 are really the critically,
Right.
the critically acclaimed years. Really, after Barely Legal, and the summer '97 ECW is looked upon pretty well, and rightfully so. But once you get to Hardcore Heaven and not long after that, things start to, Paulie's booking starts to get a little Paulie.
We'll get there.
Plastic, but and other things are going on. It's kind of a domino effect in some ways. But as far as WWF goes, the last one left standing nowadays, it's probably they're probably in their most critically panned year, right? '95 might be their most critically panned, historically at least. Pun intended, historical oracle. But it's so Shawn Michaels just went through a babyface turn. Not long after Mania, Sid was his bodyguard, turned on him.
Yep.
So we're about 4 months into Shawn's babyface turn. We have to remember that WWF often took 2 weeks off in the late summer, right around school starting, Labor Day. They almost never had Raw on Labor Day. This lasted up through 98. In 98,
crazy.
I think they had Raws. I think they did like Saturday Raws or something in 97 and 98. But this was, this lasted for first several years of Raw. So the last event that takes place of any significance before where we are is actually SummerSlam 95, which has the second Shawn Razor ladder match.
Yes.
Which I prefer over their first one, personally.
That's interesting.
I know some people don't agree with that. You may not. But so we've just had that. We've had Diesel's infamous feud with King Mabel, the classic there. Davey Boy Smith has just turned heel.
Yes.
So after the sad split of the great tag team of Davey Boy Smith and Lex Luger, the Allied Powers. Of course, we'll get to Lex showing up on Nitro, but I'm yammering. But there's a lot of it's not a lot of exciting things on paper during this time period for either WCW or WWF. I mean, Hogan, Dungeon and Dreams been going on for a year almost, and there's not a lot of there's not a lot of exciting stuff going on.
And this is the nerd speaking here, and the reason I love this, and you're going to see me have less knowledge as we get deeper into the boom portion of this, especially on the WWF side. These times in wrestling fascinate me. Unfortunately, we've been living one on the WWE side for about 17 years now, where they're trying to figure out the way of turning that arc back, right? To reversing the cycle. And it's important to say, if you're watching this show, I'm sure you've heard enough podcasts, and everyone does that term. It's cyclical. The business is up and down. It's worth noting, in terms of national wrestling, this is young, man. Like, territory wrestling, forever. You're really a decade into national, mainstream, that type of, that kind of brand that the Vince McMahon obviously made popular. They've been a few years into this lull here. And as we're about to see, a range of factors, Paul Lee's innovation, Eric Bischoff's balls, and Vince McMahon's, need to adjust, is going to change everything. So we'll do this step by step. That was a nice job there, setting the stage. One quick thing before we get started. Have you ever seen the clip where Paul Lee predicts their chances in the Monday Night Wars, WCW? Have you ever seen this? I only saw it today.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
He's got some of the wrestlers with him, and he's letting guys ask questions, and they say, "Well, how do you think they're going to do in the Monday Night War?" And Paul Lee dismisses WCW. He's like, "They're dead."
Wow.
It's worth looking this up, folks, because it's just interesting. Because I think we all agree Paul Lee's pretty sharp, but it gives you perspective on people just did not realize what this was going to do for the business, man. They didn't realize it was unforeseen how groundbreaking and how much this would change the rest of the world. So that's always worth knowing with this stuff, because certain places will paint the picture as and then when they came with that money on Mondays, it was, it's like, no, it kind of shocked people how much of a war this was from day one. So there you go. Okay. With that in mind, let's get into this, brother. So here's what we're going to do, folks. Oracle is prepared. He has sent me formats. We've discussed this with our executive producers. And each week, Oracle has got the best show. Each time we do this, we're going to start with the promotion that had the most victories for that month. So this month, September 95, ECW had the best show, 2 out of 4 weekly show, that is, okay? So we're going to start there. Now, this is fun for me because, as I've said before, this is the least familiar to me. Thankfully, Oracle is a great pro, and he has sent me many notes. So I am ready. I'm prepared. ECW. Now, this is a great month because, I didn't realize this is a big month on their side of things too, right? This is the month for Gangsta's Paradise, which we'll get straight into it, because to me, that event is famous for 2 matches for different reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ray and Psychosis speaks for itself, and what that would eventually mean in a wider perspective when we get to Nitro and stuff. The double dog collar is just conceptually that pops me, So let's start with the first half of that. You listed here, and this is, folks, this gives you some perspective on the time. ECW's debuts in this month are Rey Mysterio Jr., Psychosis, and Steve Austin. Like, it's a different deal, folks. Okay, so let's start with the first part of that. Their match here, which you listed as the best match for ECW of the month: Ray Jr., Psychosis, Gangster's Paradise. Let's start there. Your thoughts on a famous match that proved pivotal in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I'm always reminded of the clip in the WWF ECW documentary in 2004 when Heyman talks about bringing in those guys and then claiming that Bischoff stole them from him.
Yes.
Then Bischoff snides in, they get him as a talking head. They bicker back and forth in separate interviews, and it's very funny. But yeah, this was huge, right? I mean, like, this is not, unless you were living in Southern California and you were familiar with AAA.
Yeah.
There really wasn't a lot of, of course, being a trader, AAA was a huge promotion at the time, so I'm sure you had some familiarity if you were one. But these guys coming in, Ray, Psychosis, Juventud come in to ECW a few months later. Conan, even though I'm not a Conan fan, glad he's doing well. I think he had heart surgery after COVID. Or at least I hope he's doing well. They came in based off the AAA stardom, right? Eddie too. And, this is, I don't even really know how to describe it because stylistically, it's not something people in the States were very familiar with.
Yeah.
And trying to put it into context is a little bit difficult for the age differences. But if you watch a lot of that stuff in chronological order, it's totally different from anything you see. Like, I mean, just for comparison's sake, and we'll talk about that here shortly. Pillman and Liger, who had a fun little opener or whatever on the first Nitro. Ray and Psychosis are doing like spots that are way more, elaborate and spectacular than what they were doing, and Pillman and Liger were doing some pretty neat stuff. Their famous match in Super Bowl '92. That was a huge match in and of itself, right? Well, this was a step further because these guys are like real luchadors from Mexico coming in and doing stuff that working like the Rudo and Technico match. And, Psychosis is taking his bumps and like working the comedy spots and jawing to the crowd. And the ECW fans are eating it up. It's just, Ray does like a spectacular, like, switching Rana, where he gets him from the top and then switches around. I mean, and the place is just exploding. It's nothing you would ever see before at the time. I mean, I can't imagine watching it at the time and just like being blown away by it. It's just it was the first introduction of that style on a national stage in the States. The difference is ECW came on at 2 a.m.
All right.
And so, I mean, it wasn't always the most easily accessible thing, but just a great match. And really, it's more of a teaser than anything because they don't really overdo it, but they hit their spots, and it gives you a good idea of like what type of wrestlers these guys are.
And it's a great starting point because, I mean, this is going to be one of the big stories of the era, right? I mean, that style and its influence, and ironically, I'm sure there's times where you kind of you question how good that influence was when guys took this and did it, a lesser level. But it has to be said, it isn't lost on me. We're sitting here in 2022, and fucking Ray Jr. just got put on the front cover of the 2K. Yeah. And like, look, folks, we're living in. We're going to go back here. This is not the place for modern talk, but just take a moment to consider that, okay? The trailblazer of September 1995. He's already great here, okay? We are now in 2022, and dude's on like, a relatively mainstream front cover. Man, this is fucking. He's an icon. He's one of the greatest wrestlers ever. So, and we'll explore that as we go.
He's amazing.
Incredible. Now, speaking of icons, I want to circle back to that other debut. Steve Austin is here in ECW. What's he doing at this point? I think everyone's seen some of the clips, right? What stuff are we getting here? Are we getting the full, Bischoff shoots and that stuff?
So basically what we're getting here is, if we just stick with Gangsta's Paradise, so they do a deal where, so the Gangstas came in at the early summer, late spring of 95. Gangstas were, of course, basically the top heels in Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Yes.
And Public Enemy were arguably the top babyfaces of the entire company in ECW in 94, 95. Dreamer kind of takes that mantle as 95 goes on with the Raven feud, but Public Enemy were huge at the time. So the Gangstas come in and they have this big feud with Public Enemy, which was a very that was a big feud in and of itself, because it was very modern, for the times.
Right.
No other place in wrestling was going to do something like that. Understandably so, but also I'm glad that there was a place for them to do that, right? So they're having this backstage tiff or whatever, and the background is I would have to look up the Mustafa Saeed got into some the explanation from Joey Styles that he got into some sort of altercation and got arrested or something at a hotel. So he had taken out of the 6-man cage match, which was supposed to be the Gangstas and the Gangstas and the Sandman versus Mike Whipwreck and Public Enemy. So Too Cold Scorpio takes Mustafa's place, and so it's Too Cold and New Jack are cussing and getting an argument with the Public Enemy, and Joey Styles is trying to find a cameraman that'll work, and they keep doing like the fuzzy, cheesy, like,
God bless.
So Joey's going over there and he's like pulling like a live feed, like, he's fucking Anderson Cooper or something, and he's running around backstage, and all of a sudden, famous promo, Steve Austin pops up in the Hogan getup. He's got the Stevester belt, He starts cutting his Hogan promo and doing all this stuff. You're not good enough for you, but buries WCW and Bischoff and cuts a great shoot promo, honestly. There's a really funny part where Johnny Grunge goes, "Oh, Steve Austin, oh yeah," and it's really, really funny. But yeah, it was great debut. And I have to make sure I don't want to skip to October here. But he shows up again like a week later. Austin does. I'm looking at my notes here, so bear with me. He shows up like, I think maybe it's not that. It might be the first episode of October. But he does show up and he eventually gets involved in the Sandman Mike Whipwreck program. But yeah, so I mean, it's funny because that's really the only program he works, and then he just leaves. He goes to WWF and becomes
short run, tiny run.
Yeah, right? I mean, it's 2-3 months tops. But I mean, and we'll talk more about it when we get to October. Some of the promos he cuts, man, that's Stone Cold. That's Stone Cold right there. He basically, he was Stone Cold in ECW, man. Like, he pretty much was. He just had like the Dan Spivey hair.
Yes.
Instead. But
that's why it's such a famous little stop there for him, because you can see it. You can see what's about to happen. Obviously, it takes a while, right? It's not immediate, but you can see it. Let's quickly, because you brought it up, anything else on the Gangstas Public Enemy feud, which is obviously a centerpiece of this pay-per-view build or this show build this month. Anything else on that?
Not so much. There's some fun interviews and music videos that they have hyping up the match a few weeks before Gangsta's Paradise, which is on September 16th, 95. If you're interested in looking it up on the cock. I wish we could do something like that, Tope, but I don't know how that would work. Screenshots and stuff. That's probably not the best.
They're tough for that stuff,
for a free stream, unfortunately. So I'll try to give dates to help out a little bit in terms of that, if people are interested. But yeah, I mean, it's just a big feud, right? Like it was, it's a big, it was really befitting of the pop culture of the time.
Right.
And let's be honest, the hip hop craze, right? Because Public Enemy were kind of like sort of like what was the guy that had the famous song? Who was it? Vanilla Ice or something? I can't remember who it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were kind of similar to that, and of course, the Gangsters are more reminiscent of the Tupacs and the East Coast West Coast rivalry that was big at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the States. So there was very good of understanding pop culture. Heyman was very good at that.
Yeah, and again, it's worth, in fear of repeating myself here. I mean, it's worth noting like that kind of pop culture element and being topical was not exactly present elsewhere at this time in the rest of the
Right.
world. Like, because this is important to say that because a lot of the shit that Paulie does here becomes the norm, right? And it wasn't the norm then. So
Right.
that's okay. Now I mentioned it earlier, and this was your pick for best feud, right? Of ECW's month, the double dog collar deal. This is I think it's fair to say it's a famous match. I don't know how critically acclaimed it is, but just on the visual alone, like it's something people remember, right? Talk us through this program and your
So
thoughts on it.
there's a lot of pieces to this, right?
Yeah.
It involves the Dreamer Raven feud. It involves the Bill Alfonso Todd Gordon
Yes.
feud. So Bill Alfonso was the biggest heel in wrestling in 1995. It's not close. Incredible heat. So the story is at Inner Sandman, he debuts on May 13th, 1995. Shane Douglas calls in a favor from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, from the Pennsylvania Athletic Commission. And this is when Shane Douglas was like on his way out WWF, so he was going full-blown heel at the time, typical Shane. And he calls in a favor for Bill Alfonso, and Alfonso is like a crooked ref, heel ref who's like strict on the rules. They have a match where like at Enter Sandman where it's like Dreamer and Raven in a tag match or whatever, and Alfonso, DQs Dreamer for using a closed fist, and it's ECW, right? So it's just total riot rage and fury from the fans, and so it's going on all summer. And Commissioner Todd Gordon is the baby face in it, and he's trying to, save ECW from Bill Alfonso and this whole thing. And Alfonso keeps screwing over the baby faces in big matches over the summer. And of course, the Dreamer Raven feud continues on. He doesn't get involved in this match, but so we'll talk about the Cactus turn later, which is huge. But so basically, the Pitbulls were part of Raven's crew, and Luna Vachon was like Tommy Dreamer's like second with when Beulah came in.
Yes.
So they did an angle where Raven wanted the Pitbulls to super bomb Luna, and they refused to do it. So they turned babyface. So that's how that kind of feud sparked. As you notice, Heyman has a lot of things going on. He's the best I've ever seen when he did it, of having multiple feuds fuse into one another, leading up to a final big show or match or whatever. He's the best I've ever seen.
Well, that's what allows him to extend some of these stories, because if you don't introduce other elements, inevitably you're going to have to just keep hitting that same match, right? And that's what made his, that's, again, I haven't seen enough of this stuff, but that's something that frankly is just a complete, I don't even want to say lost art, because it was an art that really, I think he was central to all along. So that's worth bringing up. Yeah, absolutely.
And eventually Alfonso had like the Dudleys as like his sort of bodyguards in a way. And I think the Dudleys were part of Raven's crew. And then like, of course, Alfonso was working with Raven, and Big Dick Dudley was kind of the bodyguard of Bill Alfonso. And of course, Heyman's involved, and Heyman has his buddy 911, and so they do a big angle where Todd Gordon gets fired for like clotheslining because like they're doing a thing where like Alfonso is like about to shut down ECW. I think it's like Heat Wave in the summer, and like he's like counting to 6 when he's like counting to 10, and when he gets to 6, Todd Gordon just clotheslines him and beats the shit out of him. So he gets like suspended or whatever. So they do this angle before Gangster's Paradise for his where his suspension gets uplifted, and they show him in the crowd, and he's high-fiving fans in the crowd. Todd Gordon is, and like, and this is like this great Dangerous Zone segment with Paul E. And like they try to get 911 to come out, but Bill Alfonso gets on the mic. The choke slam's been banned. The choke slam's been banned because 911's gimmick was how to choke slam everybody.
Yeah.
So they do this whole deal, and it's so good. But basically, we get the double dog collar match, and one of the pit bulls, I can't remember which one, gets stretchered out. They do an angle where he gets stretchered out or whatever. So Tommy Dreamer just shows up because CCW and puts the other dog collar on and like gets the pin for the team. And Bill Alfonso comes out and goes, "No, he pins Raven. No, that falls doesn't count. That doesn't count." And then Big Dick Dudley chokeslams Dreamer, and he goes, "That's right, the chokeslam's on tonight. I'm allowing the chokeslam tonight." And like,
bless.
And then of course Todd Gordon comes up and he brawls with Alfonso and lets the match continue, and 911 comes out, and Bill Alfonso's like begging off, like, "Oh no," he's like trying to change his mind real quick, but he can't do it in time, and he gets fucking chokeslam, and the place loses their mind. This is like, it's one of the best, and of course eventually the other Pitbull comes back out,
right,
and they win the tag belts, but it's one of the best. It's one of the best angles, final like stories put together by Heyman ever. Like, he does this a handful of times, but it's a masterpiece. Honestly, it's a booking masterpiece. It might be his magnum opus. I mean, it's
that's awesome.
It's so well done. But yeah, it's a really, the match quality itself isn't all that great, but in terms of the booking, it's a masterclass.
I think this if you want to explore a lot, there's a lot to watch here. But if you do the double dog collar, you'll get like the vibe of it. And I think it because I've seen that, and it encapsulates a whole lot. But you just laid out. Now it is worth noting, and I'll use this to transition before we move on. Important to note there, what Oracle said about the pin on Raven did not count, because that's an important plot for that promotion. Very important. So
very important.
We're going to have to talk about their thing a lot, but talking to Dreamer. He's doing the deal with Cactus Jack here, and you listed as best promo. You popped me because it didn't surprise me. Every Cactus Jack promo, who is, I think, even people that don't watch a lot of ECW, myself included, this is a famous run of promos where, quite frankly, this is the stuff that to me maybe cements him as like a Mount Rushmore level pro. Like, this is his best stuff, I think. Talk a little about that. I think most people are aware of the kind of concept, but just like, he's just incredible here, isn't he?
Oh, it's just they're some of the best promos you'll ever hear in the history of wrestling. That's not hyperbole. That's just it's incredible, because it was coming from his. I honestly think it was coming from his heart, and a lot of it. There's a lot of bitterness from Mick. Mick he was so real, you know.
Yep.
He's kind of a bumbling old man in some ways now, but like he had a rough falling out with WCW.
Yeah.
And I think so the story goes is that he and Dreamer were tag team, and he was helping Dreamer in the Raven feud. They had a big match in the summer, and Dreamer's about to pin Raven after a big pile driver, turns around, Cactus DDTs him on a chair, huge heel turn. Fans are going crazy. The deal is that Cactus no longer wants to work the hardcore style. His body's been too abused. It's been too broken. Raven has convinced him of this. And now basically he's trying to convince everybody in ECW, especially Tommy Dreamer, not to work the hardcore style and to sign with Uncle Eric, which I believe is where that phrase came from, was Cactus in his promos. And I mean, it's incredible. And he says, if you sign with Uncle Eric, it'll save your life and it will save mine too. I mean, the each promo has a theme, and it's just I'm trying to look up some of the there's the Kane Dewey promo about his son where there was this famous sign in the ECW arena that says Kane Dewey. There's the one about his Uncle Willie who was, in the war, and he said, he's talking about how he bombed and killed people in, Japan, and now how his Uncle Willie was a piece of shit for killing all these people, and that and that he thinks that if the United States government can be, and he said something about his father, if his father can say the United States government said it was okay to kill a bunch of people in Japan, then me giving Tommy Dreamer a double on DDT on a chair, he's pretty small in comparison. So like, it's just just the promos are just incredible. You believe everything he says. They're visceral. Like it's I don't know, man. It's some of the best promo work you will ever hear. Like I'm trying to find some of the lines. And bear with me, folks. I do research while I'm doing it too, so I'm trying to find some of the lines from the promo. If we could show the promos, we would, but we can't.
Yeah, I would agree. But this is one thing. I think these get tweeted like every couple months. They're so famous and so brilliant. So you could find these. I think they'll probably be on YouTube too. So at least some of them will, right? I mean, they're just. This is his artistic peak, alongside his like mainstream hits of the late '90s, and we love all of it, right? He's great, but God, is this stuff brilliant?
Here's one. Cactus considered Willie a hero. I'm reading from an excerpt from Pro Wrestling Only. Cactus considered Willie a hero before walking through a memorial at Hiroshima, and ends up cutting a scorched earth promo on him and other armchair patriots. I hope they swallowed his spine if they even had one.
Amazing. And amazing. Truly, and I know we overdo the underrated, like people know he's a great promo. Brother, I still don't think he gets ranked enough among the true greats. I don't think he does.
He's an all-time great. There's a great promo he cuts too, and hopefully we'll get to it on the Raw where he and Funk have that match in May of '98 too.
Oh yes, yeah. Hopefully we do get to that. That'll be fun.
Oh, that's right. He starts talking about the hardcore. There's another promo on September 12th of '95, the episode where he talks about the hardcore wrestlers: Ray Stevens, Harley Race, Eddie Gilbert, Dynamite Kid. He says Dynamite Kid's has to piss in a pot and is in a wheelchair. I wonder how many people. What it's just. He goes, how many people cried for Eddie Gilbert? That's what he said,
and that's a real like the Dynamite Kid thing is definitely coming from a real fault of his, like because there was a lot of influence there in the way he had to do it differently. He says right, but like the way he approached it, there's definitely a whole lot of real emotions, as you said, packed into what mixed it, and it's brilliant. It's all time great stuff. Okay, elsewhere. We have Sandman, Mikey Whipwreck, famously a tag team draftee of yours here just a few months ago. Mikey Whipwreck, he's doing a program with Sandman. Where are we on this one? Is this good, bad, somewhere in between?
Great program. This is basically building Mikey up in this. It's his big push. Sandman's been kind of like the big champion for a while since he's been. Of course, Woman's his manager is outstanding. Woman's a great manager. And they do like some Singapore cane matches. Of course, there's a famous match where Mikey loses and he gets caned a bunch of times, and like the ref and the ring announcer are like, "Oh, I'll take some of your cane shots." And Bill Alfonso's not allowing it. Bill Alfonso's like, "Oh yeah, we don't allow it. He has to take these. He has to take all the caning." And like there's a bunch of wrestlers that are coming out trying to take it for him, including like Marty Jannetty. And like stuff like it's great stuff, man. This peak Paulie booking, just great. So Mikey gets a big win at Gangsta's Paradise, the main event, big splash on the cage with Sandman. That match is ridiculous, but it's kind of a hoot. At one point, Sandman suplexes a table onto somebody. Like it's total ECW brawling horseshit in the arena, but it's kind of fun for what it is. They have this overwrought and long entrance where Sandman, the typical Sandman entry, comes out and blows smoke, and Woman glazes into the camera, and he's just sitting up on the cage and drinking, and it's just But yeah, this feud is great. Of course, Austin will get involved eventually, but yeah, it's a really good feud. They're building. November to Remember was their biggest show at the time, I think. So they're building to that big time here. Um, Dreamer versus basically Cactus and Raven, and Dreamer has to find a partner, and of course we'll get that in October. Mikey and Sandman for a big title. They're having title matches all over the place, but eventually, they're building to the big one. Taz and Too Cold Scorpio are in a feud. So I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on. As they're building to November to Remember.
With that in mind, I have here as a note. My bad. Taz is kind of making that slow ascent, and also you noted about the in the news today, unfortunately, Bubba and Devon, right? And they're kind of before. Talk a little about those two at this point. I know Taz is further along in that process, right? But
So Bubba and Devon are both not here yet. Okay.
there you go.
So Bubba is just about to debut. He debuts in October. Devon does not debut till April of '96. So basically, with the Dudleys, it's just Big Dick.
Of course, yes, I understand. Go ahead.
Dances with Dudley. Those guys. A lot of people forget that Bubba and Devon don't come along till basically the very end. The only Dudley that really comes after them is Spike. I mean, technically, Gertner's a part of the group, but that's
sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we're almost to Bubba. As far as Taz goes, he's cut all of his hair off, so he's not bald yet, but he's got like his little crew cut. Still getting over his neck injury. So he's not doing a lot of heavy lifting in his matches, and he's barely working at all in a lot of his matches. Just doing stuff here and there. And of course, it's a neck injury that would eventually, if you watch his ECW stuff, he kind of builds to his big matches and doesn't work a lot of. He's similar to Austin, and even Austin worked. Because I mean, Austin went crazy for like a year in 01, and I think that probably ended up being a mistake.
Yeah.
But Taz never really did that. I mean, he had stuff like the Bam Bam feud where they're going through the stage and shit, but like, and don't get me wrong, there were some crazy spots in those matches.
Right.
But like, the point we're at now, Taz is not doing much. He's kind of in a feud, with the TV title with Too Cold Scorpio. Jason, of course, was his old manager. So he's come back to ECW, and I forgot to note, we get the debut of, I believe at this show or later, it's the debut of the Eliminators, Perry Saturn and John Kronos, which of course is kind of a big deal because the Eliminators were a quintessential top 4 tag team of ECW for their peak period. Of course, Perry Saturn went on to have a fairly successful career, at least in WCW. WWF, maybe not so much. Yeah, so they debuted around this time. The Steiners, of course, were Taz's buddies, and oh, man, there's a Scott promo that is just incredible, but I think it's in October. I can't remember, but he talks about I'll just say it now. Screw it. Shawn Michaels, and he's talking about how Shawn Michaels and Jason and somebody else should have a feminine match and have a, just typical Scott Steiner promo, and
incredible.
It's just makes no sense. It's just
it never did, really, did it? It was
but yeah, so there's this was a big month for ECW, man. Like I totally because I'm pretty sure the Eliminators debuted on, I think it was on Gangsta's Paradise right after. I mean, we're right around that time,
right?
So
the incoming talent is crazy, man.
Oh,
it's insane.
It's nuts.
Yeah,
it's nuts.
Yes, that's one thing that stands out about this era. Now, before we put a bow on ECW, you have a note here that was the one that I separated from the pack, and I said I need to give this separate time because this popped me so much. JT Smith believes he's Italian. Actively popped me in a way that like I wasn't I wasn't prepared
Okay.
for. Contextualize
Okay,
this.
so listen. The only time it's ever worked in wrestling where you book someone for being and they're supposed to be bad is JT Smith.
Oh God bless.
Only Paul Lee can do that and find somebody to do it. So the deal with JT is he fucked up a spot in a match with Hack Myers in the summer of '95 where he face planted on a tope. And being ECW arena, you fucked up. They all fucking busted his balls for it. So, and he had like a huge knot on his head and everything. So Paulie's idea was to just go, well, fuck it, let's just make that a gimmick and make it a thing. So the gimmick is that the knot on his head fucked his head up. Now, he is a black man. Okay. This is 1995 ECW. Consider that. He is a black man who believes he is Italian now because he face planted. And now he goes into his matches and deliberately botches spots all the time. It's hilarious. It's great. It's great wrestling. And he comes out with this huge, enormously overweight guy named Sal Puccio who's coming to the ring eating cannolis. it's like his, it's like his mob boss or whatever. And he's going out and doing the, totally stereotypical. Because, I mean, they're in Philadelphia. They're in South Philadelphia, so there's a large Italian population, and it gets incredible heat, and the crowd eats it up, and he's got this long undercard feud with Hack Myers, and I enjoy every bit of it. Unironically, I legit think it's great stuff. It fits perfectly with the ECW deal. It's hilarious. The FBI, of course, when it eventually becomes the full-blooded Italians, with JT and, James Maritato, aka Little Guido gets involved. Tracy Smothers, Tommy Rich. Oh my God, the FBI is one of the great groups in wrestling history. Just a great comedy undercard group. Good workers. I mean, JT wasn't all that great, but I mean, as a character, he was outstanding. Just one of the little neat undercard things you would get from Paulie at the time. Just, I mean, today it would be considered. I mean, a big sign reading "canceled" and huge letters would be put on it now. But I mean, it's just, and understandably so. But I won't lie, I get very much enjoyment out of it.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it's it's one of those deals, right, where it's like, with context, it's one thing, but I think we also realize, maybe some of that stuff didn't age to it. Mm-hmm. It's fun bullshit wrestling. Now, before we move on here, let's just wrap up the month with a, overall, it sounds like this is a hell of a time for ECW, and this was a hell of a month, fair to say?
Oh, absolutely, man. There's so much going on. Austin coming in, the Luchadors coming in, the Dreamer Cactus feud heating up, which of course furthers the Dreamer Raven feud, which is the biggest feud in the whole company. Public Enemy Gangsters, the Eliminators are there now. I mean, it's you've even got fun stuff with JT Smith on the undercard, and Taz is starting to become a, we're getting the Taz deal. Of course, the Bill Alfonso Todd Gordon thing is still, a big deal. Oh, also worth pointing out, Francine is also around now. She got involved at Gangsters Paradise.
Okay.
Cat fight with Beulah. So she's Stevie Richards' ex-girlfriend. That's how she debuted, Francine. So that's probably worth noting. She'll be a pivotal character going forward, I think.
Yep. We're in many of those cat fights too. And with that, let's move to, I think, our favorite, in terms of just being dumb old fans, WCW Pops, I suppose. If you listen to Late Night Grin at latenightgrin.com, you'll know that sometimes the fourth hour of the Late Night Grin is just Oracle and I talking to each other about WCW. This is the month of Fall Brawl. More than that, it's the first month of WCW Nitro. Fall Brawl is a show that truly encapsulates the eras, like not eras too strong, but like this time and how weird it is perfectly captured by Fall Brawl. In that, like, there's good, but like the overarching picture is such that it's so non WCW it feels, and this is the least WCW War Games match to this point by far. I mean, they test that going forward because it kind of gets worse as it goes, but this is a brutal. It's maybe the worst War Games, frankly.
I will briefly defend.
Oh no,
the '96 match. I like that match.
that's fair. Yeah.
But it's not a War Games match. I like to think it's wonderful storytelling, but it's not a War Games match. Yeah, this show was. Do we want to talk about War Games match right now, or just this whole thing in general?
So let's do this. So let's start with. Let's do War Games, and let's tie this in with your best angle. And I think it's a fitting choice. Luger is in. You've got and I think this, credit this before we get to the match. And I love some of the stuff they do in terms of like the shades of grey with the 4 baby faces. With Savage, I think is wonderful in those segments. And Sting trusts Luger, and so you have that. Let's talk about that dynamic, and then ultimately the match. Unfortunately, but let's just start with that because that's the big picture of the promotion. Luger's in, and all that's happening. No, go ahead.
So originally it was Hogan, Sting, Savage, and Vader. Well, Vader leaves.
Yes.
Oh gosh, what was the reason he left for?
You got to fight with Paul Orndorff punched him in the face.
That's right. The Paul Orndorff brawl. That's correct. Duh. I was popping myself laughing at that.
I think it had been coming
the other week.
I think it had been coming, to be honest, don't you? When you hear people talk about it, it feels like he had been kind of.
Yeah. Sounds like it. So Luger's debut is great because like they just sort of pan over to him and like you get like the big train store in the background.
Yeah.
And it's just this great imagery of like the Mall of America. I just imagine like Lex Luger's out shopping, Yeah. And just and Jerry Seinfeld's Pirate Jack, pirate shirt. And he's that photo of him on the aisleway with the big train store in the background is one of the great wrestling photos of all time. It just sort of encapsulates the time period, encapsulates the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're in the fucking Mall of America.
And he's wearing that top that he has on.
Yes, the Jerry, the Jerry Seinfeld pirate suit or a pirate shirt. Just classic stuff. They immediately get the dynamic just right, interesting. Like Hogan's is typical, like self-aggrandizing, like Sting's defending Luger. Savage is great. You're right. He's just like. He doesn't trust him. He doesn't trust Luger. It's which we end up getting this really good Savage Luger feud that carries out on a Nitro over the next couple of months. But yeah, it's really good stuff. And eventually Luger agrees to be part of the team, and just the dynamic's really good. And of course, we'll end up getting. The big question is where's Luger's allegiances. They do the angle where Hogan and Savage get attacked by the Dungeon of Doom, but they don't touch Luger, and there's questions there, and it's done so well. And this is going back to the bookers of the time. Sullivan's really good at subtleties. Mm-hmm. That was his strength. We talked about Heyman's putting all these things into one. Sullivan's was subtlety, right?
Yeah.
Certain little things that happen in segments, details, excellent at it, right? Like, and of course, over time, he gets exhausted and lazy, and the subtleties start to
he's one strength fight,
and also become sort of confusing too.
Mm-hmm.
Things start to make less sense. But at this time, even with the Dungeon of Doom stuff, which was crap, right? This was a good example of how that type of booking works,
right?
Particularly with the main cast of characters, these big stars, and how that sort of dynamic works, and the characters, and how they're keeping to their character. Savage, it's not out of character for Savage to be that way. It's not out of character for Hogan to be, it's not out of character for Sting and Luger, so on and so forth. Really good booking at the top. at least week to week on TV. The match itself, if we want to go ahead and jump to that,
Go ahead.
it wasn't a War Games match. It was. Didn't the baby faces have the advantage in this?
The only thing I remember from this is when he comes in and throws the fucking Hogan does that.
The dirt like he's in
Piece
Desert
of
Storm
shit.
match with fucking Slaughter.
God, I hate him.
Yeah. I will say this: Sting and Tenta had a fairly decent little opening. I mean, it wasn't great or anything, but Sting always worked hard at the time, and Tenta, I actually think, did his best. They did a cool spot where he got like jumped up on the ropes and got caught in between, and Sting was like kicking him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, they did a couple of neat spots. Sting was the best guy in the match. And I'm not saying that because Stang or whatever. I just think he was. I think Savage and Luger were there to just. Luger works hard a lot, but I think 96 he really starts to get his legs going and works and looks really good. Hogan's just throwing salt and doing all this horse shit. And, if the match wasn't good, then they do the deal where the big angle. Okay, this is big. So he's up there, and he's finally got Sullivan in the cage because that's the gimmick, right? So he's got 5 minutes with Kevin Sullivan, and they do this hilarious thing where like Sullivan tries to leave, and Doug Dellinger, who's like my favorite like peripheral WCW character of all time, is like shitty at his job but great, and he's like, okay, like I gotta get you over. and like Dillinger's like whisking Sullivan back to the ring, and he gets back in there, and Hogan's finally got his hands on him, and they're doing all this shit, and Giant comes out. God bless Bobby Heenan, but every time the Giant comes out, I hear this 3, 5, 4, 5.
It's bad, man.
Every time.
It's bad.
Every time the Giant comes out, I got to hear that shit from Bobby.
Yeah.
They did the famous angle where he, basically breaks Hogan's neck and, does the neck twist or whatever.
Yes.
And Tony Schiavone's, freaking out on commentary and the whole ordeal. Not the best piece of business.
Well, listen, folks, I can promise you this much. I'm not the expert here, but in terms of the Giant and Hulk Hogan, just getting started, brothers. Next month we'll plummet to lows that seemed unfathomable at this time. I want to quickly go back because you mentioned it, and the way you phrased it was perfect. Sullivan's ability to kind of do compelling TV that was basically built around 4 top baby faces against like just a group of goons, basically, right? And like that was a challenge, man. And Savage, for all the pomp and circumstance, he was always able to be believable. What's fun about that stuff is though you can tell.
So hold on, real quick. Sorry to interrupt. So when did Sullivan get the book? Was it because Flair had it for a while, right?
Yes.
Flair didn't have it at this point, did he? I'm pretty sure.
I think Sullivan
by the time Nitro started.
He may have still been
had some hands on stuff, but
because they do committee at some point, right? And like when they start doing that is when Bischoff kind of realizes Sullivan should just be booking the show because that there was, but the Luger stuff is fascinating because there's real shit going on there. Like there's the story of the first angle on the first night because everyone forgets. We all remember that visual you was talking about, the classic where he's standing in the aisle, but then late the show ends with the promo segment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the story goes that when they went to the commercial, Luger just stopped. He like broke kayfabe, and he was kind of grinning and popping himself. And Hogan snatched him and said, "You're taking money out of my pocket, brother," because he wasn't working while they were off camera. So there was a real. Hogan thought Luger was a phony top guy. He did not buy him as a top guy. He saw him as the guy they failed to replace me with, right? So there's a real lot of weird, and then of course when Savage was not allowed to be a full-time wrestler, they were going with Luger as like the top baby face. I'm sure that was weird. Sting, in the most Sting way ever, probably was the one that was really in the middle of it, being like, "Hey man, Lex is cool," right? So it's believable because I think there's an awful lot of truth to it. Good TV, as you said. The match is. I mean, if you look at the lineup, you probably figure out what the match is. Now, Luger was not the only debut for WCW 1995. Two very different WCW runs. We have Sabu, who of course is not long for this territory, and Disco Inferno, who, for better or worse, is very much long for it. He'll be there till the bitter end. Well, a little gap in the middle. Let's start with Sabu. Let's talk about because he's a hilarious run he has here. Go ahead.
Yeah, so he comes in and they bill him as just this crazy guy, and he gets a decent little video package because I think he worked a few C shows for a debut on Nitro, and comes in and has this fun little TV match with Alex Wright, and it's just he just wasn't a good fit, right? Like he just wasn't a good fit for WCW.
Right.
They would try with the ECW originals later on with remember when Sandman came in as Hardcore Hack, and
Indeed, yeah.
with Mikey Whipwreck.
Although
I actually like some of those. I actually like some of those hack. I like some of those hack hardcore matches.
That's fair.
To be
The
fair,
Mikey Whipwreck run is just.
God bless him.
Yeah, God bless him. There you go. Yeah,
he tried, but it just wasn't a good fit for Mikey. But yeah, this Sabu run was just it's sort of ill-fated, right? Like it just gonna work. I don't think Bischoff got the guy.
No, I don't think so.
He's not the easiest fella to work with either.
Yeah,
he's not the most professional guy in the world. So it was just never a marriage made in heaven by any means. I think he lasted 2 months. I think the last show he worked was like Havoc or something. Because then he shows up. I know he shows up at November to Remember '95. In the context here is it's important because they had the famous promo by Paulie when he no showed or whatever.
Yeah.
And Paulie came out and cut his typical Heyman promo about Sabu no showing.
Of course, because Havoc's in Detroit, right? So that's when he does the oh fuck. All right, we'll get to that. Okay. As you mentioned, Vader is we said why what happened there. We're obviously going to talk about Vader some more here. Speaking of ill-fated runs, he's got one quickly ahead of him, so we'll get to that when the time comes. Now let's get to the good.
Joe, we've lost Joe, folks.
I'm back.
You're back. You turned into Darth Vader for a second. I was concerned.
God bless. Okay. Imagine that. You just sit there with your format and go, well, here we go.
Yeah.
Now let's do the good here. Your best match of WCW September '95. Pillman and a guy that I know you and I we've kind of celebrated before. God bless him, Johnny B. Bad, one of the few reliable guys on these cards at the time. Pillman, this is a big night for him. We'll get to the second half of it, but let's start with the match. This is not the outlier that folks may, the folks may he has a lot of these matches where they're just damn good pro wrestling. And Pillman, of course, it's a pretty important month for him. So let's talk about this one a little bit. Brian Pillman, Johnny B. Bad. Go ahead.
I don't know what the deal was with this, but they had Buffer come out and announce him. Yeah. And I know it was a number one contenders match for the U.S. title, right?
Right.
Winner gets to face Sting. But these dudes went out here and fucking busted their ass and did all sorts of shit and put together an awesome match. It's a lot of people argue it's the last great Brian Pillman match, and it might be. Yeah. Great match. I mean, they just kept. I mean, it was just they had they went down to the wire, and then they did overtime, and
yes,
it was just they were doing all sorts of stuff. The crowd was eating. I mean, it was just outstanding. Great match. And Bad and Pillman both have tons of good offense. Bad has multiple finishers, so you got some good kickouts. It was a great match. And Pillman even gets frustrated in there and starts to tease a little bit,
right?
What he's going to turn into later on. So I mean, this was really the last, and it's a notable match because not only is it probably the last great Pillman match, it's the last. I mean, he was in Canadian Stampede, but he was marginal in that match in terms of his performance. Right. But it's the last match as the babyface Pillman. The one that we know. He'd already changed his look by this point in a lot of ways. But he this is kind of the last Flying Brian. This is the last of Flying Brian, I think.
Yeah.
And it went out with a bang. And I think he knew that. So I think he and Bad were just let's just fucking go out and fucking kill it.
And they did.
Yeah.
And one hell of a match. My favorite part of this month, and you had it as best promo. They shared this honor, and Pillman, as of course, will be a part of this. The Arn Anderson Ric Flair program, which for me is very much a glance at what could have been with Arn, I think, in a lot of ways. And we're both Arn guys, but like he had a great career, but this is kind of a sight of who I think we probably both believe he could have been a lot more like permanently, like because he gets a chance here. And this is what people forget. Like, because of the finish, they flip, right? But Arn very much feels like the babyface going in. Because Rick's whole thing has been that he's just been losing his mind for the last year and change, right? Hogan came in, it's been chaos. Arn is the babyface. They flip it with the finish, which we'll get into. This first, though, start with the angle, the program, and the match, and then we'll talk about Pillman and that kind of direction. So the match, it's not a classic by any means. It's probably not a top 25 Ric Flair match, if I'm being honest. But God, do I love it because it represents something, and that what it means in that building. It's a special match. So go ahead.
Yeah. So like over the summer, they were doing this deal where Savage and Hogan, of course, are teaming up, and Flair and Arn and Vader were kind of teaming up with the Dungeon of Doom to take on Hogan and Savage, and there's sort of some underlying issues start to happen with Flair and Arn in a tag match, and Flair's letting Arn do all the dirty work, and Arn takes it personally, and leads up to the handicap match at Clash of Champions, right, with Vader.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of the point where that's kind of the turning point, right? Then just the promos we get afterwards. It's funny, they built this match mostly on the C shows.
Yes.
And they cut all these incredible promos about like brotherhood and friendship and just going down the road together, and just these guys. I mean, look, they're kind of they're the type of guys who fall out of bed and cut a great promo.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not hard for them. I mean, Arn's the greatest promo of all time, in my opinion. I've stated this before.
Yep.
So I mean, but their promos are just incredible. I mean, they've got just watch the ones at Fall Brawl 95 from both. Before the match. I think they accept like Arn or Flair's is like earlier in the show before the match, like well before the match, and one's like right before.
Yes.
But check those out. They're just, I mean, it gives you context.
Absolutely. And Arn is, you can see how much that moment means to him. And he has often said that was like the most nervous he's ever been. I want to give a shout out, and this will pop you. Is it Los on Pro Wrestling Only? Or is it Los?
Yeah.
He has a Twitter thread. I'm sure you've seen this. I'm sure he said it over there too. I'm going to try and link this. It's an in-depth breakdown of the story of this feud. And to be quite frank, and this is a compliment, I don't know if it meant this much to anyone that was booking it, but I 100% believe that Arn would pop at this. The idea that this was not the feud where a guy was finally lashing out after being jealous for so long, but instead Arn was simply doing what he felt was necessary to bring to get what was right back. Rick had lost his way. This was the only way. This was the only way left to save this thing that he cared about so much. Arn Anderson never wanted to be the leader. He was the enforcer. He was the glue. I'll post the thread here in the chat. It is just brilliant. And that's why this match is about more than the match, right? I think to guys like you and I that pop for this, for these stories, like it's really a great encapsulation of what that character was on Anderson. Where are you at on the match? It's a good match, right? How high on it are you compared to kind of the normal?
I don't like it as much as others. I like it a lot more than others do.
Right.
A lot of people think it's really overrated. A lot of people think it's really underrated. I'm kind of in between.
That's fair.
What I love about it is how much Flair gives Arn.
Yes.
And how much that means when he gives it to him, because it means so much in the context of the story. Of like Flair, like Arn's over here outsmarting Flair and like catching him off guard and doing all. I mean, it's just, and like Flair's of course knows Arn. It's a great story of two best friends knowing one another and like first time facing off and then surprising one another because they know each other so well. And I don't know, it's just a give and feed and flow of the match is really good. And there's that great moment where Arn counters the figure four,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really really meaningful. It's like it's the best spot of the match.
Yeah, it's a cliche, but
Right.
it's a love letter to the promotion it used to be, basically, which is hilarious because it's immediately followed by the absolute embodiment of what it's become.
Yeah.
It's and even the build's that way. The build is so, those guys, they take it seriously. It means a lot, and it isn't a cartoon to them. So it's really interesting. I do recommend it to anyone that hasn't. I mean, I don't think it's like my favorite Arm performance by any means because that's just not what this match is to me. Like in terms of quality, like Arm's got a lot of great showings. This isn't it,
Yeah.
but it's probably his most famous singles match, right? Like I would say in terms,
it's gotta be.
yeah, and that's why it to me is a slightly big because I just think, man, it's a shame we didn't get more moments like this. But nonetheless, the finish, the aforementioned Brian Pillman interferes. He's sitting in the crowd with a lot of the other wrestlers because they kind of frame it as the roster never thought this match would happen, right?
Which I love too. Eddie
Great
and
stuff.
they're all
Yes.
sitting in the crowd. Great stuff. Great
Gives
thing
it
that WCW did
importance.
great.
Yeah, absolutely. And he gets involved in the finish, which sets up the what's about to be the new Four Horsemen, which of course hilariously will include Flair. We'll get to that next one for famous deal at Havoc, which we can talk about. What are your thoughts? And again, without going too far in October, and I know this is hard, but like, what are your thoughts on that as a direction? Do you like this with Pillman as the? Pillman's great. I don't know about this, man. The Horseman thing never works, man. It's very short, right? It's brief, so maybe I'm being unfair, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
I enjoy the Pillman thing because like it's just I've always liked the interactions he and Arn had because Arn was just like
Yeah.
I feel like Arn was like for shoot annoyed with Pillman. So
Yes.
like, that famous that famous segment where he slaps Pillman hard as shit. That had to be
Yeah. The energy levels are very different, right? It's a weird vibe. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's I think the Horseman iteration that we get in '98 I like a lot personally
Mm-hmm.
because of the history building up to it and the program and stuff. I think is a blast, and I actually think that's in a lot of ways like I don't know. It's like the Bischoff feud. I love that feud all the way up
Yes.
until the final Nitro '98. We've talked about that. Afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
it's completely falls off the rails.
Yeah.
But like I like that, but I also do like this iteration. I really do, truthfully. Um, we'll get to it. The weakest Horseman stuff I thought is when they had like the Jeff Jarrett deal, and they were like, Jeff Jarrett wanted to be a Horseman, and Flair wanted him to be one too, but Mongo didn't approve, and like
Mm.
all that shit right before Hennig came in, and they sort of turned to that.
Yeah.
So I wasn't a fan of that, but this iteration I don't mind, and of course the build to this is, we'll get to the promos with Flair and Sting, and the match itself is just a classic moment.
Incredible.
But we'll get to that soon. I think next week,
Yes.
hopefully.
Okay, we got some title changes. DDP wins the TV title. American Males win the tags. Let's start with DDP, who I know we're both a fan of. We talked about him at length on the Grin last week, right? Was it last week?
Mm-hmm.
And he's on his way, man. It's a little bit of waiting left, but he's climbing.
He's
Talk a little bit about
getting
that,
there, man.
Yeah.
I think what's funny. This match actually wasn't that bad. It didn't overstay its welcome, which always helps, right? It was fucking Renegade. But this was put together well. They it was inoffensive, and DDP's really starting to get over with the fans as a heel. And the stuff with Kimberly's well done with her as like, his ring girl, and she's always makes those kind of cartoonish faces, but it works, right? When they like I think Max Muscle's still with him here, which was just not the greatest part, but I mean I get it. He had an entourage, whatever. But he's getting there, and I think when we get to the Johnny B. Bad feud, which I'll go ahead and bring up since that actually happened on a Saturday night. I didn't watch that, but I've seen the angle before, where Johnny B. Bad misses his U.S. title shot, the one that he beat Pillman for on this show, because he gets 4 flat tires.
Incredible piece of business, by the way. Incredible.
He's talking about his flat tire and he misses his title match, and DDP shows up and interrupts him and is making fun of him and goes, "Oh, I'm sorry you got 4 flat tires." And Johnny Van goes, "How'd you know it was 4 flat tires?" Punches him. And then they proceed to have like a 4-month feud over Kimberly.
Indeed, yes.
Although most of their matches are good. So, but yeah, so we're kind of, this is a really good starting point, not only because of, obviously Nitro beginning and stuff, but we'll get to see the rise of Taz and DDP and stuff like that. So like it's a really, things kind of aligned in a perfect way in a lot of ways.
The owners of the greatest theme song in wrestling history, the American Males, the tag team champions here, and an all-time wrestling theme for all the wrong reasons. This, because you have the deal here. This is where they did the title change on Nitro, right? And you have Harlem Heat have got this ongoing, and you noted it, and it popped me because it is ongoing. Certainly, the Colonel Parker, Sherry, that whole thing. So talk a little bit to that.
Okay, so first of all, let me make it clear: the Colonel Parker and Sherry storyline starts in the summer of '95. Okay, it ends in about I don't know, right before Starrcade '96. So it's about 18 months of this. So this is going to be an ongoing thing, although a lot of it happens on the C shows. But I'm just excited for Clash of the Champions. That's a good one. But and we'll be getting to that eventually. But their wedding angle or whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, so basically they sort of, it's a Sullivan booking thing where like they sort of it's like a is Sherry, are they really in love, or are they just trying to like have distractions in order for their team to win? And it's like, but at the same time, it's just oh god, at Fall Brawl when Slater, because I think Slater and Buck lose the tag belts or whatever to Harlem Heat, or maybe Harlem Heat already had the belts.
Yeah.
And they do a promo, and Parker's all like disheveled and all this stuff, sweating profusely like he does.
He's always sweating, always.
And Okerlund's giving him a promo. It's just hilarious. But so the next night on Nitro, Harlem Heat, it's supposed to be the Blue Bloods versus the American Males. Harlem Heat beats up Bobby Eaton. Regal's not there, which is probably why they did a switch, whatever. I don't know what the story is behind that.
Me either.
But American Males come out, or they're already out, so they, Harlem Heat cuts a promo and they have a match with the American Males, and it's not really certain whether or not their titles are on the line, but they said in word that they would agree to it. And so basically Robert Parker comes down and Sherry and her make out again, and that distracts Harlem Heat and they get pinned, and there's a whole thing where like, well, is that legal? And Mongo and all them, is that legal? All this stuff, and everybody's like, well, we have to talk to the executive committee. First of all, okay, since we're going to be doing this thing, what the fuck is the WCW executive committee? No one knows.
Yeah,
they always go to that. Have you noticed that? They always went to that. The executive committee. I always think of it in Mike Tenay voice, because I always
doing the really serious face too. The classic tonight. What happened to tag team wrestling in WCW? Oracle, when did it become consistently bad pay-per-view matches? Because that's underway by now. That era is
dire, man. It's dire.
It's bad.
Harlem Heat is cool, no question.
Yes.
And Booker will always be there. Dude, Booker will always do an awesome spot every match. I swear to God, he will.
Yeah.
But Stevie, who I like the personality of Stevie Ray, but boy, when he comes in those ropes, God bless the man.
I think
Happy
structure's a big part of it too, man.
happy for him he got that ring, but my God.
So many of their matches that the decision is to like let them have like a 7-minute heat segment, and Stevie just like sits in a hold. It's like at least do like a big brawl, you know? They could do. I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah,
It's a shame. It's a
it's
real issue for them at this time on pay-per-views. Like
it
their
is.
matches are always bad.
It's bad.
Final couple notes here. Paul Orndorff, the man that sent Vader packing from the territory, becomes Mr. Wonderful. Let's start with that. Go ahead.
That segment was incredible.
Most of those segments were, yes.
It was just, dude, in this, and first of all, it lasts like 5 or 6 minutes. It's on, it goes on and on and on. Gary Spivey like shows up. Who's like this famous sidekick gimmick in like the 90s or whatever. All-time great hair. And he's all-time bad hair probably. But he's like, You're Mr. Wonderful. He starts, it's just this whole deal, and the music that he comes out to is incredible that he comes out to on Nitro the next night.
Yes.
They call me Mr. Wonderful. He's
amazing stuff.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, finally, and this is very famous stuff, so this won't be a surprise to anyone. Bischoff giving the results away. He gets straight to it, brother. No time to waste, you know. Let's get to it.
Yep. First week, Raw's back on. Second Nitro. Oh, Shawn Michaels beats a big guy with super kicks that wouldn't pass for wouldn't pass for a yellow belt or some lame line he says.
Local YMCA.
Yeah, that's what it was. Local YMCA. Thank you.
God bless him, man. It's them guts we were talking about. He had balls, man. Dude, he had nothing. He swung for the fences. Okay, now this topic fascinates me. So this is the first month of Nitro. I love this stuff, even though I know it's flawed, because it just pops me, right? That happens. My question to you, rather than just saying was it a success or not, how did they do in relation to Bischoff's alleged criteria of cutting-edge, believable storytelling? Because there is some good, but man, when you start getting into the Giant, which is about to come up and be a lot worse in next month, like, what would you say? How would you kind of conclude the first 4 weeks of WCW Nitro?
Well, I think it became true with the four main characters, at least in terms of the subtle, character traits and stuff. I think that was really well done. The production's outstanding. Nitro production, Smokes Raw production, it did the Nitro production, man, it's so good. Like the way they produced it, outstanding. Always liked the look of it. Always liked the way it was produced. Always liked the camera work. Everything was just so well done. They still gave time for good matches, usually once a week. At least they gave they gave people a chance to have one. People didn't always hit it out of the park, but there was always an opportunity there, even on the hour shows. Because I think Bischoff knew that was still WCW's bread and butter, was to have good matches, and that was what the fans expected in WCW. Some people think that's BS. That's not BS. WCW fans were a real thing.
Yeah.
They expected to see good wrestling. If they didn't, they were going to be pissed. And they were going to reject that. Just look at Hogan, because he's already getting boos around this time. They were already tired of his shit. So, you got that. But the Dungeon of Doom stuff, like, it's just... No. Like, this shit... Here's the thing. They try to make it work because Hogan's out after getting the neck crank spot for 2 weeks. They build him up coming back to Denver, and you know, he gets this ridiculous promo the next week, and we'll get that in October, and then eventually he, goes into all black, and it's a fascinating time. So I think there's truth to Bischoff's comment, but I also think that in fairness to him, I don't think it was ever going to be perfect right out of the gate. I think you kind of had to. I think it was about finding that. Eventually when the NWO showed up, they found it.
Mm-hmm.
But it took them a while. But in terms of the main event players and stuff, I think they had a good start.
Yeah, you can see the roots, right, of what will become the norm. Okay, let's conclude here with the WWF. They have got their event this month is In Your House 3, the triple header deal with the, Yoko and Owen were supposed to be Owen versus Shawn and Diesel. All the belts, 3 belts, 1 match. And this stuff is, and again, we talk about the time, we're not doing modern here. But this era is so interesting as like a parallel to some of the stuff you see today. It's really interesting, man. Like when you watch some of the stuff they do here and how out of touch it is with the audience watching, it's hard not for my brain to be like, man, like, there's some stuff repeats itself, But let's start with the event selling point, the main event, the one I just referenced. 3 belts, 1 match. Shawn and Diesel. Let's talk about that whole deal, and we'll kind of elaborate piece by piece. But I mean, it's a marquee match, right? For what they've got at the time, it's a big deal. Thoughts on the execution, which obviously isn't quite what we expected. Go ahead.
Diesel's promos are funny.
Mm-hmm.
The one he's like, "Well, chaps was traps" or something. That was amusing.
Yes.
I got to give Nash credit. He just played himself his whole career. It's frustrating. The Owen Yoko tag team is so good, dude. Every match I've seen of theirs in this project has been good.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, I mean, this tag main event itself was good. With Davey Boy replacing him.
Right.
I don't know what the story is about that, but I don't know why they did what they did. Because Owen obviously shows up and then gets pinned, and they have to reverse the decision, and they bring in Clarence Mason, and we'll get to that.
We will.
But yeah, like it's weird because then the Owen and Yoko have a great match with the Smoking Guns. That match is excellent, by the way.
I love it.
They're good. Owen and Yoko are so fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
But so honestly, for me, I was bummed. I've seen this show before, but I'm still bummed that Owen didn't work this match. I'm like, oh man, Owen, had pretty good chemistry with Shawn, and it's just like, dang, man. But I mean, they had the whole deal where like Doc Hendricks was like in Gorilla Monsoon's office the whole show, and like,
damn, Doc Hendricks
arguing with Cornette like about like what to do, and they eventually get Davey Boy in there, and the match is a lot of fun. The match is actually pretty good. It's just the finish is just stupid. Owen shows up, jumps off the top rope, gets punched in the gut, and then eats the jackknife, and like, just weird. I don't know what the story is on that. It's bizarre. I wonder if they were trying to get. I wonder if they got cold feet and decided not to give all the 3 belts, and they just decided to find a loophole to get out of it.
But what's weird is though, they do a tag title change anyway, as you referenced, and we'll get to that. So it's not that they were like, we want to keep the belts on Yoko and Owen, right? It's weird. I don't know. Now, speaking of Bulldog, mentioned he steps in here. You had in the notes about his push, and this is like this little stretch here, man. He's like kind of the top heel. Like it's not a we'll heat him up for this match or that match. Like it's a sustained run here where he's featured in the Cornette faction and stuff. And we'll talk about Cornette specifically in a moment. But let's start with Bulldog and this one of the stronger pushes of his WWF career.
This is probably the strongest push he ever got, right? Like he was pretty much a main event player. Really, from this point up until that teased Austin feud he was supposed to have at King of the Ring 97. Or was it Mania 97? Or was it, I think it might have been Mania 13 or something. It was right around that point. No, it was Mania 13. So I think it was supposed to be Brett and Sean and Austin and Pillman
Yes.
at King of the Ring 97, and they had to switch it
Yes.
up. Because it was supposed to be Austin and Bulldog at Mania. That's what it was.
Yep. And
So,
then Smiles were lost and plans changed.
Yep. Yeah, and just like when Sean and Brett got in a fight backstage and plans changed for King of the Ring.
Yep.
So, but yeah, like, this was an interesting push. I don't think it really worked, sadly for him. We will get to it. That's the next show on my doc. Gotta watch it.
Sorry to hear that, brother.
Is In Your House, Great White North. That's my next show.
Yeah.
And that's the main event of Diesel and Bulldog, which is like the main event that famously had Vince McMahon losing his fucking shit afterwards. I think that killed Dave. I mean, like, he got to stick around and still had big matches and stuff. I mean, he obviously had the Brett match at the December In Your House and had the Shawn feud in the spring of '96. But I don't think it was all his fault, you know. It was just a bad time to be the top heel in this company.
Yeah.
What a bad draw, you know. Just bad period just a bad period altogether. Bad period for business. You know, you've got a feud with babyface Diesel. Not ideal. Rough situation. I think he got thrown a bone, but it was a bone that you might not want to take.
Fair.
I'm being a little bit too fair to the guy because he had
I get you.
But he, you know, it was a tough one, you know, and there was some good that came out of that. I really liked the build with the Brett match in the match, you know, and we'll get to that here probably pretty soon. But
right.
Just I think it was a kind of a bad luck situation more than anything.
That's fair. Now, one guy that doesn't have to hang his head wondering what could have been his Cornette, who is he's doing everything he can, right? And like we've talked this from the Grim. If you hate Jim Cornette, you have very good reason to. We get it. We're talking about the wrestling character in 1995, and he's trying, brother. He's trying everything he can. Like those guys. He took a lot of investment in trying to get those guys as over as they could be. And obviously, they were all over to an extent before this even happened. But talk about Cornette. He won best promo here on your on the format. The Clarence Mason deal. You can get into that some. His month because he's central character on the show, especially this month.
Oh yeah, he's such a good promo at this time still. Yeah. He talked me into being excited for the triple header tag because his promo. There's nobody like he's one of these people who just. He talks so fast, but he never sputters. It's incredible. It's like, you know, I'm fumbling on my words 3/4 of the time on this damn show. I mean, this guy's like out here just spewing out all kinds of shit, and it makes sense, and it's piping up the match, and it's just great. The Clarence Mason deal. So we talked about it. So it's important to note that the O.J. Simpson trial. And the final verdict occurs in the first week of October 1995. And O.J. Simpson's, one of his key lawyers, was Johnny Cochran, black man. So Vince and company figure it best to figure their way out of the loophole of this tag title situation that seems like they didn't want to give the two guys all three major belts. So they have Jim Cornette as a heel hire a black man by the name of Clarence Mason. He's a character lawyer. And he's able to argue that the Davey Boy Smith the British Bulldog was the legal man in the match and the legal tag champion. Therefore, the Owen pinfall does not count. And Owen and Yoko are the tag champs still. And then Gorilla Monsoon was, well, therefore, you're going to have to face the Smoking Guns for the tag titles. And then it's a whole deal, whatever. So I mean, it's typical, and I'll go ahead and bring it up, and I'll bring it up when we get to October. But there's a whole show where,
Yeah.
like, it's not. It's like Jerry Lawler's like cheering for OJ, and
It's insane, man. It's
Vince is like he's guilty and all this. It's all like, and it's just, and
it's
like
incredible.
the whole thing is just. Let's just face it. I'll be blatant. I don't care if it's a free stream. It's totally subtle racism.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not so subtle.
Yeah, I know. Subtle's probably generous.
On Vince's side. But
it's interesting. It's an interesting time.
It's an interesting thing. Yeah. And by the way, that's the kind of stuff that Vince was trying to do to get ratings too.
Yes. Yeah.
Sad.
The next week, as you referenced, is the most like that's outrageous, right? When they have the graphic.
Yes.
Get your call in now, folks. You mentioned him quickly, so I'll bring up now. Gorilla as on-screen president. A grin or a grimace for you, brother? Are you in or out on Gorilla here in this role?
Oh, grin.
Good.
I like Gorilla, but I like him here more than on commentary.
Okay.
And like I like Gorilla on commentary, but his bearing of the wrestlers, it's funny out in a vacuum, but when you're watching shit and stuff, it gets annoying after a while.
He's very divisive as an announcer. Very, very divisive, right? So I get it. You mentioned the match earlier. I'm glad you like it as much as I do. The Smoking Guns win the tag titles. Another one of those.
Great finish too. How great is that finish? Just excellent.
It's the dumbest thing ever because like everyone watching this probably knows, but Yoko has that cell, right? Like the cell, the Yokozuna cell. And it isn't novel and it isn't like individual to him. A lot of big men do the stagger but because of the way that he was built, like he truly had this deal where he would get the people biting on him like teetering, right? And that's, at this point physically, like he's already lost a handful of steps, right? I mean, when he comes back and they win these belts, you can see like Owen's gonna have to do all the work, but he has such an aura that it's worth it.
His timing is still there too.
Exactly. It's impressive. This match is this the best Smoking Guns match, Oracle? What do you think?
I'm not entirely familiar with this stuff, but it might be. You may have seen a little bit more than I have, but they it's quite good.
Yes. Yeah, it's a standout. Hard to not kind of, I said about what could have been. I wish, things could have worked out differently with not just this team, but Yoko in general, because we're winding down here, bro. I mean, he sticks around in terms of like contractually, but there ain't a lot.
He's soon to be turning babyface here in the next couple of months, I believe.
Yeah.
So.
And then they consistently, actively send him like messages on TV about losing. Like, it's brutal, right? Like, it's a shame, but
it's hard. Yeah, it's harsh.
But that's a tremendous match, and a standout for WWE. Anything on, kind of what we're Smoking Guns as tag champs, obviously tag champs in WWF, as we learn every week. Still to this day, it can be a challenge, but on this night, it feels important, and it's a surprise too. It's an organic surprise to people.
Tag wrestling WWF was actually pretty good during New Gen.
Better than the other side, right? Ironically,
but they were fine. They won the belts an awful lot during this period. Pretty over. Not my favorite, but not my least favorite.
Yeah, that's fair. Heel factions, Cornette's guys are not the only one. We've got the DiBiase's $1 Million Corporation. A infamous is the word, right? Not a run that's remembered fondly. Talk a little bit about their role here in September '95.
Well, they're sort of dying off in a way.
Good.
I mean, they're still sort of like the main heel faction, but really, it's mostly it's the Owen and Yoko are the main heels now.
Yeah,
and Bulldog too.
Cornette's just so much better than DiBiase in this role.
Camp Cornette's the main. They're the main heels. The $1 Million Corporation are just, it's just, it's like everything about it is just cartoonish and lame, and I like Sid. Obviously ring work was never his forte, but it's just they'd been going on and on for 18 months at this point, and it was time, you know.
Right.
Of course, they brought
Yes.
Austin in, and he was the last sort of gasp of them, and that didn't work out, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, but
Yeah, it's interesting. What's fun about this too is like how many of these names we're talking about are going to jump at some point in the next couple of years. It's wild, right? Like it's insane to really.
oh yeah, this is going to be a trend, guys. I mean, people are
Yeah.
jumping left and right, left and right. It's going to be a thing all the way up till the end.
Mm-hmm. Now the standout match on that in your house show, and it was one of the topics, and it's a big one. Brett's placement on the card. Here he is working this. This is a famous like. Man, Brett could pull off some crazy shit, right? Jean Pierre Lafitte and the pirate and him stealing the shades. Is it, or the jacket? The jacket.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I have to pimp this promo from Brett. So you know how like you know they do the call-in promos on Raw, which are always one of my all-time favorite. They do
Yes.
like a squash match, like PCO squashes somebody, and like of course, you know, Jean-Pierre Lafitte at the time. He looks way different now. But
He sure does, brother.
but and you know, they do the classic Vince and Lawler call in, and Brett's on the phone. And Brett just starts talking about the pirate gimmick. And he goes, well, I didn't know. Like the way Brett says it, and you know, because it's Brett, you can hear it. Brett goes, well, I didn't know they still had pirates. I didn't know that was still a thing, anyways. But he's Brett subtly burying the WWF cartoon bullshit because it's Brett and he doesn't care. It's just amazing. Like, God love Brett, man, he's so good.
And he pulls it off though, man. This match is great. It's
Oh, this
fun,
match is
right?
excellent. Like they do all kinds of crazy shit. He opens the match with a
Oh,
fucking tope suicida that
that's
is like
terrifying. Terrifying though.
lucha, like that is like lucha level good.
Mhm.
And of course he does a bit where he rips the jacket off, and they brawl around the ringside. And they do all kinds of crazy shit. Oh my god, Brett will bust out stuff too, and he's so smart. He's busting out stuff that he wouldn't do normally in a match
Yeah.
because Brett always is. He's a thinking man's wrestler. He's a
Mhm.
wrestler's wrestler in a lot of ways. So he's doing like flying forearms and flying drop kicks and shit to like try to take the guy down, and like he does this great spot where he like misses a crossbody and just basically hangs himself on the ropes. Like so good. The finish is always what people talk about.
Mm.
This one, the finish, I didn't love as much as others might because I don't think it was executed quite as well because I don't think Lafitte fought it off as well as I would like him to. I
Yeah.
think it was one of those deals where Brett had a really good idea of like, oh, you know, Brett, you know, thinking, oh, like the people, if they're paying attention, will notice that he's a bigger guy, and I'm smart, and I realize I can get him now on the sharpshooter when he's
Yes.
not expecting it. I don't think Lafitte did a great job of. I think he just let him put him in it, and that bothered me.
Yeah.
But that's a minor complaint. Match was great. Holds up pretty well.
It's one of the big stories from '95, right? Brett being put in the background while they did the Diesel thing, and obviously Sean just turned. Obviously, in a couple months, that's about to change up because they need a
Mm-hmm.
new guy to get the belt to where they need to get it. It can't be, overstated how important matches like this are to kind of Brett's case in terms of greatness. I think because while I think we all agree that if in an ideal world he was never doing any of this, in some ways, as much as the match is fun, right? It feels so
Mm-hmm.
prelim. That's what makes Brett the fucking man, right? Like, look how he
Yeah.
did it, and that's
Yeah.
that's why people always talk to him with such adoration because it's such a Bret Hart performance in every which
Right.
way. He's
Right.
brilliant.
He's so gifted, man, and like he's
Yeah.
just his persona, just the way he carries himself, is just so charming to me. Such a
Me
fucking
too.
bitter fuck, and it rules. Just wonderful.
Yeah.
Like we should get Contrarian Alex on here with us, and we should just praise Brett sometime.
Oh,
'Cause
okay.
he's an all time. I mean, just God love the man. I mean, even like the Hakushi, that feud
Mhm.
with
Okay.
Hakushi, just terrific matches. They're over here with Diesel as the top guy. Vince is trying to make Shawn the top guy. Shawn gets this long build to be the top guy. I mean, he basically already is. Let's face
Yeah.
it, Shawn's already a top guy at this point. He's above Diesel at this point, in my opinion. I think Diesel. I think Vince already saw that Diesel was a failure and was already pushing Shawn above him at this
Yes.
point. I think
Yeah.
SummerSlam '95 was a turning point when Shawn and Razor had that ladder match.
Mhm.
Um, and then that disaster of King Mabel match happened.
Quite the contrast, right?
Yeah, yeah. But Brett had to be there. He was still Brett was really the top draw still in the company. He really was, I think.
Yeah.
At least internationally, because I know Diesel and Shawn didn't draw shit.
Mhm.
And that's not me. I mean, I'm being somewhat biased, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty
No,
close to fact
I
too.
I think this is important. And look, we probably only need to say this once because I think everyone knows. If they didn't already know, we're Brett guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a weird imaginary truth about what draws and what doesn't. And if you put pen to paper on what the description is in the general consensus among wrestling, uh, folks that think they know what they're talking about, the description would match far better Diesel and Shawn than it ever did Brett. And there's no evidence they ever drew better than him. They certainly drew way worse internationally. Like
Mm-hmm.
Brett he was drier. He was never like over the top and like. But guess what? People liked him, and
Yeah, I
it's
think it's because he was true to himself.
yes,
I actually think
yeah,
that sold people. A lot.
absolutely,
I really do think that was big.
yeah.
He was very organic
I
and
think.
authentic.
I mean, I look. There's very few times I can give kind of cultural insight here, but I will say, in terms of British people, there's just no world in which British folks are going to like someone like a Hulk Hogan more than Bret Hart. Like
Right.
he's
Right.
Bret's human, right? He doesn't feel like a comic book character, even though he
Right.
looks cool. It's just
Right.
he's the man. We love Bret, and we're gonna have more time to talk about him for the next couple of years. That's good stuff. Now, a couple of things. Goldust is coming soon. I think we should leave the topic of Goldust for when he arrives, right? Because there's
Sure. His
certainly is
vignettes are
interesting.
excellent, though.
Yes,
I'll say that.
yeah, and when he arrives, him figuring out how he's going to work the character is really kind of an interesting topic again. So we'll do that. You mentioned him earlier with ECW, Shane Douglas, Dean Douglas. He has a match with Razor, and then we can get into the angle with 1-2-3. Let's start with the Douglas Razor thing, and then we'll talk about your angle of the month for WWF, and one that I love, the 1-2-3 Kid Razor Ramon kind of internal conflict. Let's start with Dean and his early days here in WWF.
Boy, Shane had no chance out of the gate, didn't he? And look, he never helped himself,
Right.
but my God, they hated him. They hated him, and even today, I still feel sympathy for him because Jesus, what a shit gimmick to be handed. And I mean, the worst thing you want to do to a guy like that, with all of his shooty shoot promos that the Clicker are aware of, is to put him in a fucking feud with the Click. That's like,
Yeah.
look, I'm not the biggest Shane Douglas fan. Okay, his stick gets really annoying in ECW at times, like really annoying. But man, did he get it back? I mean, I defended Bulldog, and somebody said it right, and I think it's unfortunately true for Davey Boy. He probably wasn't a main event guy. And nor was Shane Douglas, really. Let's be honest. But man, did Shane get a bad draw. Here you go. You get to fucking work the Click. Guys that, are totally the antithesis of Shane Douglas. And the guys who are like, just, oh God, could you imagine? I mean, what a shitty situation. Terrible gimmick.
Yeah.
Vince fucking didn't get him. Like, just, nah. It was never going to work. It was never going to work.
Yeah, it went about as well as you'd expect. The 1-2-3 Kid angle is I think has aged better than anything else in terms of a television product from this time in WWF by like a distance. And this is the deal where obviously they have genuine backstory, which always helps, right? These two characters, and 1, 2, 3 Kids kind of struggles with his role in that whole dynamic. Like, talk a little about that. It was your best angle for the month for WWF. It's good stuff, man. Really good TV
It
wrestling.
really is, and not to harp on it too much, but it's the reality of it. Them being click guys, they're always going to work hard with each other,
Yeah.
and they're always going to put, they always work well together, right? Because they trusted each other and whatnot. These guys did. So, but and that helped the storyline. But this is really good stuff because it's like, I don't know, it's one of those things where like you get into the, again, the detail, the character details, the history of, the kid's debut, which they did a good job of covering,
Yep.
and him feeling like he's like the little brother and second fiddle to Razor, and he wants to be better than Razor and wants to prove that he's as good. And it's really good. It's an easy dynamic to follow,
Yeah.
right? And they do it really well. I think Kid's especially good in it. Razor still his cartoony promos are still too much,
Yeah.
I think, for me.
I agree.
But in terms of his characterization within the matches and the frustration that he shows, I think Scott Hall does a really good job. But like, yeah, I mean, it's a really, really, really fun feud. I like it a lot. It's a slow burn for a Kid to the heel turn. It's really good stuff, and they tease it, and eventually we'll get to that. But they have good matches, and it's a fun. It really is probably the strongest feud going at the time for sure.
Yeah. And who'd have thought it, right? You said it then. Something we can all understand. If you can watch this and you can see it from any which way, but you're going to get something from it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a rule there that should be followed more often. But nonetheless, okay, finally, give me some context. I know the story of Bill Watts' brief, hilarious run. Give me some context and timeline on this, brother.
If I'm not mistaken, he comes in for these 2 tapings. He literally books the entire product from after triple header up until the point before Great White North. He books like 4 Raws, I think. Could be less than that.
My God.
And they're actually all like mostly good because
Yeah.
there's a lot more like competitive wrestling. Marty Jannetty comes back in the September 25th show, has a really good match with Skip, aka Chris Candido. The crowd going crazy for Marty. Like, of course, the Smoking Guns Owen Yoko match. Like, there's like PG-13 debuts, and we'll get to them later on in October. Like, there's all sorts of like, you can tell it's Bill Watts booking. Of course, the famous angle where the heels beat up Taker, and and we'll get to that next week. It's all Watts booking. You can tell there's more focus on like matches and I don't know. It seems it's there's less cartoon stuff going on.
Grounded, right? It's more grounded.
Outside of the Shane Douglas thing, it's really not cartoony at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very brief period. It really wasn't going to work with the dynamics of the backstage political situation at the time, but it was an interesting little run, and it actually served us some good episodes of Raw, believe it or not, during a really bad period.
Yeah, because you had them as the strongest show on the 4th week here, right? So the first and the third were ECW, second was WCW, and Raw took the final week. Overall, how would you say WWF reacted to the arrival of Nitro? Pass grade? What do you think? How did they do?
It didn't seem like there was any sort of desperation or panic set in yet,
Right?
Which makes sense. It's just starting, right? I don't think that there was anything. It doesn't appear that that's the case yet. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something.
No, I think you're right.
I think the OJ thing that we'll get to in October might be a sign of things.
Yes.
That then we'll get to that next week. Like I said, I'll probably be able to finish up October. We should be able to probably the same time next week. But that I think starts a trend, and things slowly start to get over, and then of course we'll get to the Ted skits and whatnot. So
Indeed.
But yeah, there's no desperation there. There's no noticeable competitiveness going on yet. It's worth noting that I think some of these shows were taped earlier, and,
Yeah,
before night, and some of this stuff, the tapings kind of can make things a little bit more complicated. But
for sure.
not we're not quite to the the race hasn't it's begun, but we haven't gotten to the fun parts quite yet.
So they both had one show each in terms of the best show. If you had to pick between who had the stronger month in terms of just Nitro versus Raw, which way would you go?
Nitro.
Nitro, right? Yeah, and I think it's important you had that kind of that point. They're approaching this very differently, right? For now, like it's very different. WWF is still taking the approach of like they're trying to fix stuff internally because obviously they have their frustrations. Bischoff, we know what he's doing, brothers. He's going for it. He sees one result here. So, that was September 1995. That's everything from the notes from all three promotions. Oracle, we said 2 hours was our target for this program, brother. Look at that. Pretty good start, right? Happy with that?
I think I think we did a pretty good job. Again, I think Joe and I both agree that we wish we could
Yeah,
do stuff, show stuff, but we can't, obviously, for obvious reasons. But hopefully this is a fun little discussion each time we get on here about what was going on at the time. I'm gonna do my best to get some dates and stuff. ECW Gangsters Paradise, September 16th, 1995. That is on Peacock. All this on Peacock.
right.
Fall Brawl 95, September 17th, 1995. In Your House triple header. In Your House 3, that's key. So if you go into Peacock, it's In Your House season 1, episode 3, or whatever the fuck.
There you go.
Those are the big shows. Of course, first Nitro, September 4th, 1995. That shouldn't be too hard to find. The Owen Yoko versus Smoking Guns tag, September 25th, 1995 Raw.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think if there's anything else I want to throw out there. Some of the great Bully promos, September 5th, 1995, ECW Hardcore TV, September 12th, Hardcore TV, September 19th,
Mm-hmm.
Hardcore TV. September, I think there might be the September 26th was the third one. But that's just me throwing out some dates to help you guys if you want to check that stuff out.
Right.
Because we can't really throw in being a free stream and stuff. We have to be careful with that, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
every week I'll try and throw out some dates and whatnot.
Yeah, hopefully for some of you it's a trip down memory lane. Hopefully for others it's like a guide to what they should watch, right?
Right.
And I think what makes this stuff so fascinating is there's some incredible narratives that form, and it's just a great story. So I'm looking forward to telling this here as we go through it step by step. As you can see from the Confirm Sheet's wonderful graphic, you can follow the Oracle of Wrestling, who was fabulous in preparation for this, and I had a great time. You can follow him at King Motivator H. You can follow me at Joe Hulbert. We'll be back, right, Oracle, in about 25 hours. We'll be grinning, brother. We'll be talking about Rampage and breaking down the AEW roster a little bit more. That will be latenightgrin.com. That's behind the paywall. That will always be behind the paywall for our sake. It's a 4-hour podcast. I promise it's worth it, especially if you like this content. Until then, any final comment, Oracle?
No, but be prepared to discuss Halloween Havoc 95 in about a week's time. Be prepared to discuss WWF's In Your House 4, The Great White North.
Good
which
Lord.
is considered one of the all-time bad pay-per-views. Be prepared to discuss some really great ECW TV that is just awesome.
Yeah.
So should be an exciting week. Like I said, I should be able to finish up. So be ready.
There you go, folks. A lot of bad wrestling ahead, and hopefully ECW is a bright spot next month. So that will hopefully be next week. But get us on the Twitter. You'll be updated. We'll speak to you all tomorrow for the Late Night Grin. All hell.